Hey, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. I want to talk about something today that I know, all caps, know that you've felt. Maybe you're feeling it right now. The volunteer conversation in your church has become a cycle. No matter what you do, it just keeps coming back around. Every week, some ministry environment comes to you and says, we need more volunteers. We're struggling. We can't. You know the conversation. Can you help? Can you make an announcement? Can you write a sermon? Right? We don't have enough people. There's just not enough hands. Not enough capacity. And maybe you feel this to fully maximize the mission. So you do what all churches do. And listen, I have been there, right? Been there, done that. I have all the volunteer t-shirts to prove it. You run, here's what you do, another volunteer recruitment Sunday. You preach on spiritual gifts, maybe. You make the ask from the stage with as much energy and gumption and vision as you can muster. You tell stories. You try to elicit a tear. You bring a child on the stage and not sell it, but you know what I mean, right? You are working the room. And here's the good news: it kind of works, but it just works for a moment. It works for a while. You get some people to fill out an interest card. You get a few of those people to return an email or a text, and maybe a couple of new faces end up in a serving role. And then a month later, you are right back in the same conversation with your team, your volunteers begging you to help recruit more. You're feeling the pressure. We need another volunteer Sunday. I mean, it's just a repeating cycle. I want to tell you something today that I think is going to shift how you see this problem entirely. Okay, you actually don't have a volunteer shortage. You have a movement problem. And those two things require completely different responses. So let me start with the distinction that really does matter here, okay? Recruitment. We recruit volunteers, right? At least that's what we always have done. Okay, recruitment is transactional. Okay, think about it. You need something. You ask for it. Someone says yes. You get a slot filled. And that can work, right? And I'm not saying recruitment is wrong, but recruitment, just as a strategy, has a ceiling because it's built on need, not on a pathway. And need-based strategies work only as long as you are actively pushing the need, okay? But the moment the push stops, the momentum stops. Why? Because it's not movement. Movement is very different, okay? Recruitment is transactional. A movement is sequential. It's relational. It moves people or moves someone forward from where they are to the next best step before it really even asks them to step up to something. It has language that creates belonging before it creates any obligation or need. And the need, if there is one, is their need, not the church's need, right? This idea, movement, right? It is built so that the journey from attending your church to owning a place of this mission feels more natural and really obvious rather than like someone is just signing up for a job. So the churches that I work with and have worked with that are not having struggle volunteer conversations, right? They're not better recruiters. This is important. They're not better than you at recruiting. They're not doing, a more compelling volunteer Sunday, right? What they've done is they've built something underneath the ask that most churches have just never designed. They have built a clear pathway, and that pathway changes everything. So here's what let's get really specific with this, okay? Because this is where most of the work kind of sits. Think about how someone becomes a committed volunteer in your church. Like just right now, pick out somebody who you know is a committed volunteer. Now, how did they get there, right? Not how you hope it would have happened for them, but not the ideal version, right, of a 1, 2, 3, 4 step process, but how did it actually happen for them? Or pick somebody imaginary who just walked into your church, last Sunday, and now they are pondering if this church can become their church, right? How might their movement happen right now? In most churches, the path kind of looks like this. Someone shows up, they attend for a little while. Eventually, someone asks them to do something, maybe from the stage, maybe through a specific ministry leader. They say yes, or maybe they say no. But if they do say yes, they get placed in a role. They serve in that role until just they stop because life gets complicated, or they burn out, or they just, quietly, and this is so frequent, they just quietly kind of stop showing up. And then you are back to where you were, square one, needing to recruit again, right? That is not movement. That's a transaction. And it occasionally works. There may be really committed people in your church, and that was their story. They got tapped on the shoulder, they heard the message, they signed up, and now they are just full on owning the mission. But, and I feel safe saying this, more often than not, that's an anomaly. That's not the normal reality, okay? Because movement wasn't necessarily designed, it happened accidentally. And anytime success is an accident, we can't repeat it. So we got to think about how to create a volunteer movement, okay? Now, by the way, quick pause. This idea works for everything we do: group participation, financials, giving, right? Discipleship at its highest level is nothing but a journey of movement, okay? We're going to focus it here on volunteers. So, what we need is a movement, and a movement has a defined on ramp, has lots of them. It has language that speaks to where someone actually is right now, rather than, just what you need from them or the empty spot that has to be filled, right? Movement has a sequence, and it moves a person forward step by step from attending to serving to owning. And there's lots of little steps in between. And it doesn't skip the relational pieces in between. And here's the piece that almost every church that I have seen misses. Movement requires repetition, but the kind that doesn't feel repetitive. That's an interesting way to think about this. We'll unpack this. So the invitation, to take a step has to be woven into the culture of the church. For instance, if you ask people to take a step and it isn't consistently woven into the fabric of your culture and your church, it's going to feel transactional. But when movement becomes the norm in your church, now it doesn't feel like a transaction. It's just what we do. It's a part of how we talk. It's a part of what we do all year long. Steps is what we do. Movement is who we are. That's very different than a volunteer recruitment Sunday. So when we have these kind of volunteer recruitment moments, these transactional moments, what it really does, it creates a spike. And a spike problem, a spike can solve a problem, but it only solves this problem for like a moment. Because, and I think this is where a lot of leaders get stuck in that, because the spike feels successful, right? Like you do the volunteer Sunday and it does kind of work, sort of, right? If nothing else, it produces activity and people do respond, mostly emotionally, but they do fill out the card, they scan the QR code, they text their number, and not all usually, but some of the roles do get filled. And there is kind of like a moment where it feels like things are moving. But here's the problem: it's a counterfeit movement. 3 months later, a month later, you're right back, as we said, where you are. And here's why. Enthusiasm alone, it really does have a shelf life, right? I mean, a single volunteer message in the spring has a shelf life. Like whatever got activated during that push, it wasn't connected to something structural, right? It was connected to a moment. And you know what moments do? They fade. So the church that really breaks this cycle, as I said, they're not doing better moments or more moments. They're doing less moments and they're adding more structure. They've just built a pathway that captures the energy from a moment, but converts it into sustained movement. Because without that pathway, right, every spike that you create just accelerates people through a system that really doesn't have any great next steps for them. And so you end up repeating the cycle over and over and over again. You make the ask, people say yes, they serve for a little while. Nothing really, and I hate to say this, but in most cases, nothing really moves them deeper. Nothing helps them understand how their contribution connects to the mission. They don't feel any more ownership than they did before. Nobody really follows up when their life gets complicated, or they do, but it's not in a truly pastoral way. And so eventually we just stop seeing them. Listen, that is not a volunteer problem. That is a design problem. And I want you to hear that like as good news because design problems are fixable problems. So here's what I want you to do next, right? As we kind of wrap this up. Before you plan your next volunteer push, like before you schedule another volunteer recruitment Sunday or put another serving series on the calendar, I just want you to answer one question as honestly as you can. Okay, here it is. If someone walks into your building this Sunday and genuinely wants to get involved with your church, right? Um, how does that happen? How does that happen? Is there a clear path for them to step into? Is the next step for them easy and obvious? Is there someone ready to walk alongside of them relationally, not transactionally, right? To help them move forward? Or do they end up on a list somewhere that just fills a spot? If you're not sure what that looks like in totality for you or your church, then odds are the pathway isn't there yet. You have some structural work to do. And the work is not to make a better ask, it's not a stronger push. It's about creating a clearer journey, a more clear pathway. And I'd encourage you to map it out. Like start with how someone goes from first attending your church to first serving in your church. What's the first serving opportunities that you offer? And then progressing along the way, along the volunteer journey to more depth, more kind of responsibility, more leadership. Who's walking alongside of them to help that happen? Who's pouring into them every week, maybe even daily in some ways? Who is coaching them up through this leadership journey? How is that happening? Who initiates the conversations? What triggers new conversations that need to be had? When a person doesn't show up, what does that trigger? When they show up 4 weeks in a row, what does that trigger? Like, this is all structural, you can tell, right? Systematic. What does the ask actually sound like? Like, what happens when a person says yes? Where does the path break down, right? This is how you build a journey. You think about it like rocks that you're going to step on to cross the river. Every single rock is placed very carefully, and you, as the guide, are walking alongside the journey, holding their hand, leading them to that next step, that next rock. Now, I don't even have to tell you, you know what's at stake if you don't change any of this, right? The cycle is just going to continue. Next month, you're going to be asked and you're going to do it. You're going to recruit. You're going to see a mini spike. The spike's going to fade and you're going to recruit again. And every time you run that cycle, it just costs more energy than the time before because your most capable leaders, by the way, are the ones that are kind of burning out under the weight of this lack of a journey system that just keeps loading up on them rather than developing other people around them. I mean, it really feels like a volunteer rat race, doesn't it? Like your most capable potential volunteers, the ones who would give the most, they end up staying on the sidelines. And it isn't because they don't care, but because no one has built a path that made sense for them to take. So the ask arrived before the relationship did. Never helpful. The obligation came before the belonging, right? And so they watched from a distance and they just stopped watching. And so the mission that you care about, it just keeps running less than full capacity, right? You're not maximizing the mission. And again, it's not because everybody disengaged. It's just because the system never asked them to move. It only asked them to volunteer. And that's the difference. And that matters. So remember this. Recruitment fills slots. Movement fills people. And that is what we're trying to do.